Andy Kotelnicki confirmed that he will be back for another season at Penn State, and that means that big things are on the way for the Nittany Lions.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the action going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, just visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're talking Andy Kotelnicki confirming himself that he is back at Penn State for another season in 2025, which means that massive things are on the way, not only for this season, but the future for Penn State in 2025. West Virginia, how did this happen from the Mountaineers' point of view? And no Heisman invite for Tyler Warren. We're discussing all of it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the discussion. But yes, this is a massive win for Penn State. Andy Kotelnicki coming back to Happy Valley. And more importantly, I want to begin with what's in the present. The 2024 postseason run here. No distractions, no dual loyalty, Andy Kotelnicki being responsible for things that are going on at West Virginia while simultaneously trying to fulfill his obligations and responsibilities for Penn State as the offensive coordinator if he were to coach all the way through. And that was one of the deal breakers, which we will talk about a little more in depth from the West Virginia side of things. But the 2024 postseason run, Andy Kotelnicki was committed to this. He wanted to coach through the 2024 postseason, the college football playoff for Penn State. And if he had accepted the job, say that happens. Say that he says, all right, I will coach all the way through at Penn State, and then I will take the job at West Virginia. Say that's what actually happened. Penn State has one of the best chances to make the college football playoff championship, to make the national championship. That has to do with the favorable path. That has to do with the fact that, yes, they are playing SMU, one of the weaker teams in the college football playoff, or not as strong, I should say. You don't get into the top 12 by accident. Same thing with Boise State, the lone group of 5 team. This is a favorable path for Penn State. It is okay. It is acceptable to admit that. But then Penn State does have at least not mismatches. There are more favorable opponents to play any of Georgia, Notre Dame, or Indiana than it is to play Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas. All of these things are true, meaning that it sets up for an ideal path for the Nittany Lions to get to the national championship. They have the third best odds to actually reach the championship, the third most likely projected team to get to the finals. Andy Kotelnicki now being laser focused, tunnel vision, all in on Penn State, not having to worry about interviewing anymore, competing for the head coaching job, doing all these other extracurricular things. He can focus on the postseason run. And Penn State, honestly, this news about him confirming that he is returning puts any other doubt to rest about the postseason run. Penn State can now focus on this. They don't have to worry about Kotelnicki. Kotelnicki still has more to prove in a sense. Right? That West Virginia didn't want to keep me, that was the deal breaker, that they weren't willing to be patient for me. This Penn State fans should feel a large sense of relief, peace that Andy Kotelnicki gave that confirmation, and now it sets up nicely for the postseason run. Then on to 2025. It is okay to look ahead because it is transfer portal season, even though Penn State has not played this playoff game yet. This gives more of a reason for Penn State to be a favorite going into next year. 2025, now you have the consistency, and James Franklin has talked about that. I don't expect Tom Allen and Justin Lustig to go anywhere. It is important to have consistency and continuity. Penn State will now have its head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and special teams coordinators all back for the adjacent follow-up season. That does not happen very often at any program in college football. There is so much turnover. It's not just at Penn State. There is so much turnover in college football and NFL football, right? It's just across the board. And now Penn State has that continuity. But people are going to want to play for Andy Kotelnicki, not a question mark at offensive coordinator. So Penn State doesn't have to spend time interviewing, wondering. They have a confirmed recruiting pitch. They have a strong recruiting pitch that, hey, look what Andy Kotelnicki just did with our top 10 offense. We can do the same again in 2025 if you join the Penn State Nittany Lions. So that will attract talented players out of the transfer portal. They need wide receivers, right? Wide receivers will want to come and be a part of Andy Kotelnicki's offense. In that same breath, what about offensive players that would want to return and play for the same coordinator that they just had ample success with? Drew Aller comes to mind. Nicholas Singleton. Guys that are eligible for the draft. Throw in Katron Allen as well. Those guys that are debating if they should move on to the NFL, if they should leave Penn State, now have all the more reason to come back and play under Andy Kotelnicki another time. So the postseason run is setting up nicely for Penn State. The start to the 2025 season is setting up nice for Penn State. If Drew Aller isn't content, this is more so about a Drew Aller. If he is not content with his draft status going into the 2025 NFL draft, I didn't like the idea, the prospect, because it now look, at least from what we're gathering, what we're hearing, nothing is confirmed. Drew Aller would be leaning toward coming back for the 2025 season and going into the 2026 NFL draft. That is a big maybe. It's 50-50 with a slight lean towards him returning. That probably wouldn't have been the case if Kotelnicki happened to leave for whatever, West Virginia, another head coaching job, because why would Drew want to possibly ruin his draft stock, or at least not help it, by playing for a third different offensive coordinator in his time at Penn State? It doesn't make sense, but now it does when the coordinator that has helped ascend your game, has helped boost your draft status, has made you into a better player. Yeah, it might be beneficial for you to come back for a 2025 season and run it back, as they say, right? So everything is setting up very well for the Nittany Lions, not only for the college football playoff now, but in the 2025 season. This makes Penn State a contender for, and they obviously have to retain these players, but one domino leads to another. 2025 is already setting up for Penn State to be another national title contender. Let's talk about the Andy Kotelnicki situation itself. Did he turn down West Virginia? It sounds like there is a bit of a deal breaker here, because he wanted to stay through the postseason and West Virginia wanted him ASAP. They wanted to bring him in and have him start recruiting. They weren't waiting for him for Penn State to finish its playoff run, and who knows how far they go, right? SMU, Boise State, at least not a mismatch in the semifinals, because I don't want to say, oh, that's a favorable matchup. No, Georgia, Notre Dame, and Indiana are not favorable matchups, but Penn State matches up better with those teams than the ones that I named earlier, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas. So it sounds like he was trending to be the guy that West Virginia was prepared to take this chance, but they wanted him now, and they were not willing to be patient with him. So at the end of the day, both sides basically agreed to disagree here. It wasn't the right time for Andy Kotelnicki. What a stand-up guy. I got to say, that's what I got to say. What a stand-up guy Andy Kotelnicki is to stay committed to Penn State and to honor his duty, to honor his obligations and say, this is the team that gave me this opportunity, this platform to further my coaching career, to put me in a position to interview for a Power 4 job right after one season. Kansas was the stepping stone to get to Penn State, and then Penn State became the stepping stone to get to eventually that Power 4 head coaching job. It's going to happen. It will happen sooner rather than later. So Kotelnicki will be a prime candidate to land maybe an even better head coaching job next offseason. And I know that's a ways away, but understand that Kotelnicki will not be staying at Penn State for a long time. If he's already in the talks for the West Virginia head coaching job after one season at Penn State, imagine the opportunities that could open up next season. Everything happens for a reason here. Andy Kotelnicki staying committed in the Nittany Lions, not wanting to leave early wanted to finish out the season. That shows that he's an honorable man. That shows that he is honorable. His word is everything. And you should, if you didn't like Andy Kotelnicki before, if you didn't respect him before, or if you were new, you had a neutral opinion about Andy Kotelnicki, that should make you like him at this point. We're going to talk about West Virginia's side of it. How it fell apart. Is this bad for them? Yeah, because I think Andy Kotelnicki would have been an exceptional hire. And what about another Penn State assistant? I was curious because it was brought up to me. J1 Sider has connections to West Virginia. Would he ever leave for the Mountaineers? We'll talk about that on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the action, NFL action going with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5. $5 and you will get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if we look over at FanDuel.com, we can see that Penn State, the lines for Penn State versus SMU in the college football playoff. Penn State is an 8.5-point favorite, minus 310 on the money line, plus 245 for SMU. The total is set at 53.5. Penn State is also plus 550, the fifth best odds to win the college football championship, according to FanDuel. If you like those lines, you can bet them all right now over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's pick back up with J1 Sider and then talk about it from West Virginia's point of view. Because I think they missed here on not being patient for Andy Kotelnicki. It's kind of like the Dan Lanning effect. Look how it's worked out at Oregon. While they were patient, allowed Alabama to finish the season, and then waited for Dan Lanning to take over. That's all I'm saying. We'll get to that in a moment. J1 Sider, because this one is actually a Penn State connection, right? Associate head coach, co-offensive coordinator. There is no upward movement for J1 Sider outside of becoming the next offensive coordinator. And maybe that's what he's waiting for again. If Andy Kotelnicki leaves, if and when, because it's going to happen, and probably in next year's cycle, probably in the 25 offseason going into 2026, Penn State will lose Andy Kotelnicki for a head coaching job. The writing is on the wall. It is okay to admit that, and I think it's better to understand that now than holding out hope that, oh, he'll be here for 4 or 5 years. But J1 Sider is interesting because he has been at Penn State for a long time. 2018, he's been committed to James Franklin and has helped the program by being one of the best recruiters in the entire country, in addition to the fact that he has developed running backs left and right. He's also helpful in just not only recruiting running backs, but recruiting across the board. He is one of the best recruiters and assistant coaches in the entire country and deserves a promotion at some point in time. He's a West Virginia guy. He played football there. That is something that was brought up to me, and I had to be reminded of that, oh yes, he has roots at West Virginia. So if Andy Kotelnicki took the West Virginia job, there was kind of an outside possibility that what if J1 Sider had followed Andy Kotelnicki to West Virginia and became that offensive coordinator, if Kotelnicki was thinking that, right? I don't know what their personal relationship is. I don't know if Kotelnicki even thought of what his staff would be or what assistants he would take at Penn State if and when he leaves, whether it's West Virginia or down the road. So that's even still a possibility. If Kotelnicki and Sider are on really good terms, that could be a possibility. So that in itself isn't realistic this time around. And I don't think Sider leaves this offseason either. And I wanted to double check that, talk about that with other mutual Penn State contacts here and say, hey, J1 Sider, is he linked anywhere? Because he has been connected to Florida Atlantic's head coaching job in the offseason here. That position's been filled. So there's no longer an opportunity there. But in due time, this will happen. Not tomorrow, not going into next season, but I think it's a very distinct possibility that J1 Sider does go with Andy Kotelnicki if Kotelnicki offers him the offensive coordinator job. It has to be a promotion. And I've asked J1 Sider myself personally, just, hey, you've been at Penn State for a long time. You've bided your time. You've been patient. There's not anywhere else for you to go up at the program unless somebody leaves. What are you waiting for? What are you doing without, asking? But that trying to get an understanding of what are you doing? What are your plans? And point blank, he said, I'm not just going to take a job to take a job. It has to be the right situation. It has to be the right scenario. Also, in that same tone, speaking on behalf of him, it has to be a better situation. Penn State does give him a pretty good situation. I don't think you can get any better than associate head coach, co-offensive coordinator, one of the leading recruiters, right? Or at least one of the most impactful recruiters, because Penn State does have its own recruiting staff that does a lot of hard work. But J1 Sider is a big part of that, right? It's why he's ranked as one of the best assistant coaches when it comes to recruiting. So that would be a big loss for Penn State if when it ever happens. He obviously is going to be linked to any Florida job that opens up. But just be aware that it could be a possibility down the road, because it got me thinking, okay, if Kotelnicki, if and when he does take that head coaching job, J1 Sider naturally would be one of the first candidates that I think would be an appropriate choice at offensive coordinator for an Andy Kotelnicki staff if he doesn't have one already in mind. They've worked together now. They are working on it because, again, J1 Sider is co-offensive coordinator. They are working together time in and time out. You also have to think of Danny O'Brien, but I think with where J1 Sider is in his career, that is a natural transition for him. He's not going to take a step backwards, but in due time, he will probably be somewhere else, and maybe it is on Andy Kotelnicki's staff, maybe it isn't. I want to talk about West Virginia's situation because it is interesting to me. Why not wait for Andy Kotelnicki? The same way that Oregon did for Dan Lanning, and it was worth it. I am not saying that West Virginia would have been in that situation had they hired Andy Kotelnicki, but I think if you were patient and had waited, long-term success would have had a pretty nice setup there as the head coach. So I think West Virginia missed, and it's not that there aren't other good candidates. Rich Rodriguez is going to be a good coaching candidate. Jeff Monken at Army is also an ideal candidate too for West Virginia. So they have different priorities, but let me point this out. You have the spring transfer portal window. I understand the need to start building the program and everything else, but West Virginia has other opportunities to close the gap on the fact that, hey, Andy Kotelnicki wants to finish his tenure at Penn State or at least do the respectable thing. We can at least honor that request, right? Doesn't seem like it. Because I don't get the sense, no matter what decision West Virginia makes, that they are going to be Big 12 contenders or national contenders in the next 1 or 2 years. That's why I don't see it that way. So why not play the long game where Andy Kotelnicki probably gives you the best long-term success if you back him and you take care of him the right way as a head coach, as a leader of your program, that in 4, 5, 6 years, your program turns the corner and becomes that consensus top 20, maybe even a top 15. I like to think that I would respect West Virginia as a brand, as a program, and I think they got it wrong here with Andy Kotelnicki by not being patient for him. Look, here's how I look at it. With all of the different reports and rumors circulating, West Virginia has too many different people competing for power and influence over that program. State politicians getting involved, really? If that even is remotely true, that's a rumor. As it's been pointed out to me, that it's a possibility. But the fact that that's even floating around, the entire setup sounds like a recipe for disaster if you're West Virginia, and especially for a first-time head coach. I say good luck to the individual who can push through that. And maybe it's Rich Rodriguez 2.0 for the Mountaineers. That's how I look at it. I think West Virginia gets it wrong by not being patient. I think Andy Kotelnicki's a home run hire. Things don't work out for a reason, and I think Andy Kotelnicki ends up dodging what could be potentially an awful situation that hurts him in the long run for his coaching career. Doesn't give him enough stability. No Heisman invite for Tyler Warren. Should he be in New York? 4 players were invited. He wasn't one of them. We'll talk about it on the other side of this break. And today's show is also brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and so much more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. Tyler Warren should have absolutely been invited to the Heisman ceremony in New York. If we're going to make the argument that Travis Hunter does all of these things and he's the most valuable player, then the same exception or the same standard should be applied here to Tyler Warren. There was not a quarterback in this year's group that was that true difference maker. Dillon Gabriel, Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and Ashton Jeanty got invited to New York. That is an incredible top 4. Those are talented players and are going to have futures in the NFL, and were the best players from this, some of the best players from this season. But when you think back to Tim Tebow and Johnny Manziel and Lamar Jackson, guys who were just absolutely unstoppable, Cam Ward and Dillon Gabriel weren't that this season. I feel like Oregon collectively across the board was so insanely talented offensively and defensively and pretty stout in its special teams that Dillon Gabriel had a strong impact, but wasn't truly that runaway most valuable player. Now, Travis Hunter's wide receiver 1 and cornerback 1. I get the joke. Oh, he's average at 2 positions. Snap counts don't matter. Snap counts absolutely do matter. The fact that he is still as exceptional and incredible as he is playing 2 different positions, that puts him in New York. Ashton Jeanty chasing Barry Sanders' record and scoring 29 touchdowns. You know who doesn't get any respect in this conversation? Army's quarterback, Bryson Daly, as a quarterback, had 29 rushing touchdowns. 1 interception. Army was 11-1. So if anybody should feel slighted in this entire conversation, it should be Bryson Daly. But I'll tell you what, Tyler Warren should have absolutely made the cut. My final 4 would have been Ashton Jeanty, Travis Hunter, Tyler Warren, and Bryson Daly. Dillon Gabriel and Cam Ward did not have those all-star MVP, true difference-making type of seasons. Oregon still would have been elite with a different quarterback. Miami missed the 12-team college football playoff and probably could have had similar success with a different quarterback than Cam Ward. Penn State would not have been the same offense without Tyler Warren. He is a true MVP. The same thing can be applied to Ashton Jeanty at Boise State. They would not be in the college football playoff, and Colorado would not have been as competitive without a wide receiver and a cornerback number 1. So this is flat out wrong. Tyler Warren was snapping the football, playing tight end, wide receiver, running back, quarterback. What other player is doing that in the country? Travis Hunter's playing 2 positions. Tyler Warren is playing 4 or 5 in a given game. They didn't get it right. This is absolutely downright wrong. Tyler Warren should have absolutely been one of the top 4 players invited to the Heisman ceremony. And I can't believe the committee can look past this and say, oh, well, Harold Fannin led in receiving. Great. What about Fannin Jr.'s rushing yards and passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns in that conversation? Was he doing any of that? No, he wasn't. Tyler Warren made such a difference and an impact and is a huge reason why Penn State finished 11-1, 11-2 after the Big Ten championship, but why they're in the college football playoff. Bowling Green's nowhere to be found. I know that's a MAC team, but Tyler Warren should win every single tight end award there is and should have been one of the 4 players invited to New York. It's downright wrong. Let me circle back to what James Franklin had said about KJ Winston and how he confirmed that he was out for the postseason. KJ Winston, that is a big deal. And why this team isn't a true bona fide national title contender is because of the absence of KJ Winston. No fault of his own. No fault of his own. Injured, not available. But this defense truly did go through a makeover because KJ Winston was not available. You couldn't maximize Jalen Reed's ability. He was going to be that lion back, that additional safety, that third safety that would have opened up, and this defense would have been ferocious. And now we're seeing the effects of it from that Big Ten championship game. The impact of KJ Winston has been felt for most of the season in select spots, but really against these better teams, Oregon specifically. But KJ Winston now being out, he's not going to be back and available for the postseason. And that's a shame because that would have at least contributed to Penn State's postseason playoff run. He would have been a huge difference maker. We'll see if he comes back, right? I think he is set on the NFL, but NIL exists. Maybe they could convince him that he can boost his draft stock with another season. We'll see if he ends up coming back. Let's talk about some other players that could make an impact this playoff run for Penn State. Keon Wiley comes to mind, Caden Saunders. Elliott Washington only played 3 snaps in the Big Ten championship and did not play against Maryland. Zariah Fisher. I am confident that Keon Wiley, Caden Saunders, and Elliott Washington will be available moving forward for the postseason. No insider reports, just based on the way that they're practicing. So this isn't direct information that until James Franklin confirms it, but the way things are trending. Wiley and Saunders have been practicing for over a month now. Washington was at least available for that game against Oregon. 2 weeks, you get a bye week essentially here before SMU. Extra time to rest and recover. Those 3 guys should be available. Zariah Fisher, I don't have as much confidence here. Hasn't been practicing. I think I saw him walk out of the tunnel with the team. He was in comfy clothes, right? He was not ready to go. He was not available to play. It's a shame because Zariah Fisher really worked his way back from that first injury. And I can't imagine this one is any better because he was injured in the spring. He was injured during spring football. And this has been 8-9 months now. This has really been a long-term recovery for him. Hopefully, he's able to continue to play football and everything else. I just don't think it's going to be this season. But Penn State could definitely use another impactful linebacker in Keon Wiley. He was supposed to be a breakout player this season. They need Keon Wiley back the most. The way the defensive backs are playing, Elliott Washington would be very useful. Same thing with the wide receivers. These are all positions of need for Penn State. Linebacker, cornerback, wide receiver. All these guys can help. They can contribute. They can make an impact. They can provide depth so that everybody can play better and play to their fullest when it matters most in the postseason. So Penn State, things are at least trending in the right direction for those players until spoken otherwise. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko, your host as always. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section about Andy Kotelnicki, about the whole West Virginia going in a different direction. Tyler Warren being snubbed from the Heisman ceremony. Are you kidding me? What is the award even meant for? Quarterback position was down. Generational running back. Travis Hunter is doing incredible things. And in that same breath, so is Tyler Warren. I want to know your thoughts down in the comments section. Please leave a like, share it with your friends and family. I'd really appreciate it. And if you're not already becoming an everydayer, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams.